Hare Krishna. Judging without understanding, the recipe for ruining relationships. We'll be discussing this topic as a part of a new series on Ramayana wisdom. Now, in the Ramayana, there are many fraternal relationships, and one of the main plot of the Ramayana is the story of Ram, centered around especially his exile and the abduction of his wife Sita and her reclaiming. Now, apart from that, there are several subplots, and one poignant, moving subplot is the fratricidal confrontation between the two monkey brothers, Vali and Sugriva. And fratricide is central to the Mahabharata, with the two main protagonists, the Pandavas and Kauravas, being hostile due to the unremitting envy that the Kauravas have towards the Pandavas. In contrast, fratricide is not central to the narrative of the Ramayana. It features much more fraternal devotion, as say of the younger brothers Lakshman and Bharat for their eldest brother Ram, or even Kumbhakarna's martyrdom for the sake of Ravana. Now, amidst these narratives of subplots of fraternal devotion, one subplot that stands out is the subplot of fraternal confrontation, and that is of Vali and Sugriva. And yet, unlike the Mahabharata, where the fraternal animosity continues till death, in the story of Vali and Sugriva, there is reconciliation just before death. And that reconciliation is as emotionally riveting as it is ethically illuminating. The story of these two brothers plays out mostly at Kishkinda, which in the Ramayana's geopolitical setup is a kingdom of great strategic significance. It comes in between the kingdom of the humans, which is towards its north, and the kingdom of the demons, which is at its south. So these two brothers, Vali and Sugriva, like the Pandavas, have dual sires, earthly and heavenly. Their earthly sire is the king of the Vanaras, Riksharaj. Now, the Vanaras are a race of celestial monkeys, and many of them have power and intelligence that equals and even exceeds that of humans. So they are more akin to, at least some of them, their leaders are more akin to gods than humans. And the heavenly heavenly fathers of Vali and Sugriva are Indra and Surya respectively. Now, just as in the cosmic hierarchy, Indra is superior to Surya, similarly here Indra's son Vali is superior to Surya's son Sugriva, and Vali is superior both because he is by age elder, and by strength he is much more powerful. And just as Surya and Indra live harmoniously in taking care of the cosmic administration, similarly Sugriva and Vali lived harmoniously in taking care of the administration of the Vanara kingdom. Over time, in accordance with the time-honored principle of primogeniture, Sugriva, Vali ascended the throne of Kishkinda, and Sugriva became his faithful and resourceful assistant. Um, Once there was a formidable demon, Mayavi, who had traveled to various places, challenging opponents and defeating them. And he heard once the strength of the demon of the Vanara Vali, and he decided to challenge him. So he came to the outskirts of Kishkinda and had bellowing out his challenge. "Oh Vali, you coward, come out and fight with me if you have any guts." Vali was sitting in his throne in his court, and when he heard this thunderous roar, he could not tolerate the insolence of this challenger, and he immediately sprang up from his throne and marched out, and Sugriva followed behind him. Now Vali, of course, intended to fight honorably in a one-to-one combat, but Sugriva followed him just for additional protection in case the demon had some associates who might try some devious tricks. But Mayavi did not know the honorable intentions of Vali. So he thought that, oh, these two brothers, these two formidable monkeys, they will both attack me. I can't fight with both of them. And being fear struck on seeing this awesome twosome, he just turned around and fled. Now Vali realized this demon was very insolent, and as he observed very powerfully, he felt that he would keep creating disturbances in the neighborhood unless he was taught a lesson. So he gave chase, and desperate to shake off these two brothers who were pursuing him, Mayavi ducked into a cave, which was actually an entrance to a whole maze of to a whole network of catacombs and mazes. Now as he disappeared deep inside, both Vali and Sugriva stood at the entrance deliberating what to do. And Vali turned towards Sugriva and said, "You stay here and guard the door. I am going inside. In case the demon evades me and comes out somehow, you can deal with him. You can prevent him from escaping." Sugriva begged. He said, No, it's dangerous. You should not go alone. Let me come with you." Vali said, No, you stay here." Because Vali was the elder brother, Sugriva deferred to him and stood at guard outside. And he kept peering inwards, waiting for the demon, but he could hear no sound. After a long time passed, finally he heard a giant roar, giant roar, screaming sound of the demon. And he tried to figure out, was this a cry of agony because this demon had been attacked by Vali, or was this a cry of victory because he had attacked Vali? And he strained his ears and prayed, trying to catch some sound of Vali, but he heard no sound, and the sound of the demon had also stopped. And as Sugriva waited and he could hear no sound from anywhere, that deafening silence got to him. He inferred that somehow in the darkness, by his deviousness, the demon had got the better of Vali and Vali had been killed. So Sugriva felt torn between the desire for avenging his brother's death and his duty of protecting the citizens of Kishkinda from the terrors of this demon. He realized that if the demon came out, Sugriva's chances of overpowering the demon were slim, because Sugriva was powerful, no doubt, but more powerful than Sugriva was Vali. And this demon had turned out to have been more powerful than Vali because he had overpowered Vali. Sugriva realized that if I am not able to stop him. If he kills me also, then he will break havoc on the whole countryside. She will have no protectors left. Our whole kingdom will be destroyed. So he thought, and he looked around, and he came up with a strategy. Using all his strength and skill, he uh, uh, went to a giant boulder which is almost like a small hill, and he pulled and he pushed that boulder with all his strength till it neatly and fully covered the entrance of the cave. And now, feeling reassured that this demon would not be able to push this stone, push this boulder, and thinking that he would be trapped now, trapped forever, Sugriva departed from there. With a heavy heart, he went back to the kingdom where the courtiers and the citizens were waiting anxiously for news. Crestfallen, he told them about the demise of their king and ordered a period of statewide mourning. And after the mourning period got over, the courtiers insisted that you have to ascend the throne now. A kingdom cannot be without a king, it needs protector. And as at that time Vali had begotten no heirs, so Vali, his brother, younger brother Sugriva, would become the king. So Sugriva, still grief struck still grieving the death of his brother, ascended the throne and took on the royal responsibilities, which he had been doing ex officio, which he had been doing out of his office unofficially till then. Now, a few days later, suddenly Vali entered into the court, his eyes bloodshot. What had transpired in between was Vali had entered into the cave, and after a long exhausting search found the demon, and it pounced on him and did short work of him. Now the demon, in trying to retaliate and get Vali off him to escape, he has been screaming in pain and horror. Now Vali, wanting to conserve his energy and too intent on finishing off the job, did not dissipate any energy in roaring himself. And that's why Sugriva outside did not hear any sound. Then after that, when Vali eventually, after sending the demon to the next world, then he departed, he came out of the cave, or came near the exit of the cave, and he found this completely dark and totally blocked. He called out he tried to push, it was immovable. He called out to Sugriva and he heard no sound. An unpleasant suspicion started taking root in his mind. Could Sugriva have done this? Could his trusted younger brother have betrayed him, have trapped him inside the cave so that he could himself usurp the kingdom? He did not like the direction of his thoughts, but the evidence seemed undeniable. This raw boulder was so big that no wind or natural force could have moved it. And even if some big storm had moved it, how would that boulder have come and exactly positioned itself on the entrance and covered it so precisely? Now Vali was so exhausted by the search and the fight that he had to stay several days inside the cave, searching for some whatever grew over there to eat and to live thereby, to recoup his strength and to come up with a strategy for coming out of the cave. And finally, when he came out of the cave and breathed fresh air, and then feeling rejuvenated but still agitated at the thought of the possible betrayal of his brother, he charged towards his kingdom. He paid scant attention to the astonishment of all the citizens when they saw him alive. Just his thoughts were fixed on his traitorous brother. And when he entered into the cave, naturally his eyes were bloodshot, and when he saw Sugriva sitting on the royal throne, his rage knew no bounds. He charged towards Sugriva to pound and pummel him. Sugriva, when he saw Vali alive, was delighted. He thought that his brother had been dead forever. He was so happy. But his joy changed into agony when he saw Vali charging towards him. Thinking with lightning speed, Sugriva understood. He was also born in a royal family, and he was aware of what all political intrigues keep happening in royal circles. So he immediately got down from his chariot, got on his throne, and approached Vali. And he fell at his feet, and he started to speak to him. Oh, I'm so happy that you are alive, my brother. But Vali was in no mood to hear. He started battering Sugriva mercilessly. Now, Sugriva had no desire to retaliate, and more than his bones being broken by the blows of Vali, he felt his heart broken by the suspicion, and not just suspicion, the conviction of his conviction. That means when he saw that Vali had already convicted him, he felt broken. He had no desire to defend himself. And he realized that there was no chance for him to make any reconciliation, to give any clarification. Vali was in no mood for hearing. So deciding that maybe in the future when Vali had cooled down, he would try to clarify and reconcile, he just fled from there. And Vali unfortunately was so angry that he gave chase. And he kept giving chase, he gave chase. And Sugriva fled far and wide, and wherever he went, Vali kept chasing him. And Sugriva wondered what to do, where to go, how to hide, where could he get a safe haven. And finally he decided that the only safe haven he would get would be in a place where Vali would not be allowed. And he found out that Vali had once offended, say, Matanga Rishi. After killing a demon in a brash show of power, he had whirled the demon around and flung his corpse far away. And as the corpse had been flowing through the sky, the blood from that corpse had fallen in the sacrificial arena of Matanga Rishi. And Matanga Rishi had felt irritated because blood falling in the sacrificial arena means that sacrificial arena gets desecrated. And if it is desecrated, then the sacrifice cannot be completed. So the sacrifice has to be actually started once again. So feeling irritated, and especially feeling that this Vali had become too proud to brandish, to flaunt his strength like this, not considering what trouble it would cause, he cursed him. He said, "You proud king, if you come in the vicinity of my hermitage, and if you sully it by your presence, then you will fall dead." And it was in this area of the Pampa Sarovar, which is quite close to Kishkind actually, in the neighborhood of Kishkind only. So after searching far and wide for a safe haven, Sugriva found it in the vicinity of Kishkind, in the Pampa Sarovar area, which was where Matanga Rishi's hermitage was. And there Sugriva lived in a state of uneasy peace, still fearing that Vali may send some assassins to do the job that he himself was not allowed to do in that area. And it was in this state of uneasy peace and unremitting fear that Sugriva was living when he met Lord Ram. So when Ram came there, and now Vali had realized, Sugriva had realized that there was no chance for reconciliation because Vali was not ready to hear at all. And Vali, of course, he had no chance for he had no interest in reconciliation. He was so convinced that he was right. Now we can say actually, both brothers arrived at mistaken inferences. Now, Sugriv thought that Vali had been killed when Vali had not actually been killed, and similarly, Vali thought that Sugriv had betrayed him when Sugriv had not actually betrayed him. So now we could say that both inferences were right based on whatever information was available for them. For Sugriva not hear any sound and to hear the sound of the demon, it was reasonable to conclude that Maya has killed Vali. And for Vali to find the boulder there and then to see Sugriva sitting on the throne, it was reasonable to confirm or to infer that Sugriva betrayed him and usurped him. But the difference is that Sugriva had little, if any, opportunity under the circumstances to seek any clarification. Risking the demon coming out was too risky, not just for his life but for the peace of even the nearby kingdom. Whereas now Vali had abundant opportunity to get clarification. He could have given Sugriva at least once a patient hearing, or at least he could have heard open-mindedly from the other courtiers and tried to understand Sugriva's side of the story. But unfortunately, he never did that, and he succumbed to one of the basic human errors. It is the error of it is what psychologists call the attribution error. Attribution error means we observe a certain behavior, and after observing that behavior we try to infer its cause. So we attribute certain behaviors to certain causes. Now in this attribution, based on the evidence that we have, when we try to assign some cause to that behavior, we can often come to a wrong inference. We can attribute the behavior to something which is not the cause. So for example, what do we mean by attribution error? We may see somebody eating too much and we may say this person is a glutton. So this overeating is the evidence of the gluttony of that person. Now, if we ourselves start gobbling food like that sometime and now we see ourselves gobbling, do we say that I am a glutton? No, we say I am very hungry. I'm very hungry. Now, couldn't it be that person was also very hungry? It's possible, but often when we see some behavior, we just based on our preconceptions about that person and that situation, we just assume a particular cause. And in general, we give the benefit of doubt to ourselves, but we don't so often give the benefit of doubt to others. Now, when this happens, when we don't give the benefit of doubt to others, then we often commit misunderstandings. We misjudge the situation. So here what happened is that Vali succumbed to this error of attribution error because of his haste and overconfidence. That's what often causes attribution error. Haste means we want to see a situation and we want to arrive at quick understanding. We want to quickly understand the situation. Snap judgments, as they say. And further, we want to arrive at a decision not only quickly, but we feel that our reading of the situation is clear. Our understanding of that person is also correct. And that's why we can feel that we think that, okay, my understanding must be correct. So Vali, because of his power, because of his position as the king, because of his power as a formidable warrior, he had a lot of ego, a lot of overconfidence. He had a substantial amount of ego, and because of that he was overconfident. So when he saw Sugriva sitting on the throne, he just inferred that yes, this must be because he has betrayed me. And by this hasty judgment, he actually he ended up with a nasty misjudgment, and his judging without understanding and transformed a lifelong fraternal friendship, fraternal devotion into a lifelong fraternal confrontation. In fact, this confrontation actually went on and it ended only in death. Very unfortunate. Now, moving forward, when Ram heard the whole story about how uh, Vali had dispossessed Sugriva, Ram promised that let's form an alliance, I will help you. And then it's a long story, but essentially Ram shot an arrow which pierced through the chest of Vali while Vali was fighting with, while Vali was towering over Sugriva when they had been fighting, when Vali had knocked down Sugriva. So now, first there was an abortive attempt and the second attempt he succeeded. Now, of course at this point the question whether Ram's shooting an arrow at Vali when Vali was fighting with somebody else, whether such a shooting is fair, that's a natural question coming. Whether this is moral, immoral, that natural question will come up. And actually that question came to Vali himself. And Vali in fact went to the so extreme, he was so convinced about the guilt of Sugriva that he said, "Oh Ram, it is probably because of the bad association of Sugriva that you have also lost your sense of ethics. And that's why you have done this heinous act." So Ram provided a series of counter arguments which essentially centered on one point, that Vali was an aggressor, or had been unfairly and brutally aggressive towards his brother. He had dispossessed Sugriva of all his kingdom. He had exiled Sugriva. He had taken away, plundered away all his property and exiled Sugriva. He had made several attempts to assassinate Sugriva, and he had even taken away Sugriva's wife. After Sugriva had fled from the kingdom, Vali took Sugriva's wife as his own wife. So Ruma became another of the co-wives of Tara, who was Vali's main wife. And for an elder brother to take a younger brother's wife as his own wife when that younger brother is still alive, that is grievously sinful. It is almost like incest. And Ram said that after giving an elaborate reasoning like this, Ram essentially said that for all these heinous forms of aggression, there is no punishment lesser than a capital punishment that will be suitable. And now at this point we may not feel this argument convincing. If we don't, the point is we have to look at the context. We are just observers. Vali was the victim of a perceived injustice, and yet Vali accepted Ram's reasoning. In fact, so if a plaintiff in a case, after hearing from the defendant, gets such a clarification that the plaintiff feels that I don't want to continue this case, and others don't have to poke their nose into that and think that still there is some injustice happening. And in fact, this is a whole subject which can be there which can become a topic for a separate class only entirely, about the ethics of Ram's actions. But suffice it to say that Vali was satisfied, and then he'll return to our theme. So Ram was when Vali accused Ram about his immorality, Ram gave the answer, and Ram was so confident about the rightness of his course of action that he told Vali, "Oh Vali, if you still think that what I have done is wrong, then tell me just now, and I will remove the arrow from my body from your body, and I can arrange to have your strength and your life restored to its past glory at this very moment. Just tell me." And when Vali heard these words, he pondered the analysis that Ram had given about Vali's actions, and he realized the truth of those words. He found Ram's words mortifying and at the same time liberating. And he turned towards Ram and he said, "Your words have awakened me." He said, "I had also had a gnawing feeling that maybe I had treated Sugriva wrongly. For a long time I had been feeling like that, but my pride did not allow me to admit it, leave alone correct it. So today you have liberated me from a misconception and saved me from doing any further sins to my brother, to persecuting my brother any further. And he told Ram that actually one will get many lives. Soul is eternal, one can get many lives. But to get a death in your presence is extremely rare. So I do not want to continue life, I want to die in your presence. Please bless me thus. And Ram smiled. By this time, the news of Vali's fall had spread like wildfire, like had spread like a viral news in the whole of Kishkinda, and his wife and son Tara and Angad came charging out and fell at his feet, crying in tears, holding on to him. So while he turned towards Tara and he said that you had warned me not to go against Ram. You had told me to make up with Sugri, but unfortunately I did not hear your words, and that's why I am suffering today. He said that after you mourn for me, stay under the shelter of Sugriva. And he turned towards Angad and he said, bear no animos, bear no grudges towards Sugriva, because he is not responsible for my death. It is my own misdeeds that are responsible. Then he turned towards Sugriva and he told Sugriva, brother, I have wronged you terribly. Please forgive me. And please don't hold any malice towards my wife and my son, because they were not party to my injustices to you. And then Vali took out a jewel necklace which he had been wearing all along. And this necklace had actually been given by Indra to him, and it had Indra had given him with a special benediction that as whoever would wear this necklace would not die, no matter what happened. So that was because of the presence of the necklace, Vali had not died till for such a long time. Even after Ram's arrow had pierced his body. Now, what father would not want to give such a necklace to his son? So, just as Vali's father Indra had given the necklace to him, Vali could have been entirely justified in giving this necklace to his son, Angad. But he realized that he had wronged Sugriva greatly, and knowing that he had to make amends not just by words but also through his actions, he took the necklace, he took it out of the necklace and gave it to Sugriva. And the moment that necklace left Vali's hands, Vali's soul left his body. And Sugriva saw Vali become permanently motionless and silent. As he had heard Vali's heart-wrenching confession and request for forgiveness, Sugriva's heart broke. And he started grieving, alas, how unfortunate. As he remembered Vali speaking these words, he started remembering how this was the brother who he had known, he had loved, and he had missed for so long, and now, regrettably, he would miss forever. And he felt that I have been the cause of my brother's death. Alas, I have been guilty of fratricide. The only way I can atone for this is by entering into my brother's funeral pyre and dying with him. And wherever he goes, there I'll serve him and try to make amends for my wrong. He started grieving so wretchedly, so intensely, that both Ram and Lakshman consoled him, giving him words of consolation and then words of wisdom, and reminding him that a great duty awaited him now that the great king had departed. He had to take care of the citizens, he had to take care of the kingdom, and most importantly, he had to right now take care of the funeral of Vali. So he started giving orders to arrange for a royal funeral for Vali. And then he announced the beginning of a second statewide mourning for Vali. The first had been when earlier it had been thought he had been dead. So now, and this is not a story with a happy ending exactly. It is further. It is also not a story. It is a story that defies the conventional good versus evil stereotypes. Why? Because it's not that one of the brothers is completely evil and the other is completely good. No. So Vali was in his own way virtuous. His pride made him unable to admit his lapse in judgment, but overall Vali was a virtuous person. And similarly, Sugriva and Vali's virtue came back to the fore when his pride had been pierced by the arrow of Ram, which had caused him to uh, fall wounded and wasted on the ground, and his presumptions had been pierced by Ram's arrow-like words. And at that time, he completely shifted tack and he reconciled with his brother. So, Vali was also a virtuous person, but he was impelled towards a vicious action because of being gripped by a disastrous misjudgment. Now, some people try to portray Sugriv also as a power-hungry person who schemed to usurp his brother and take over the kingdom. But Sugriva's genuine grief at the death of Vali and his willingness, his eagerness, his readiness to enter into Vali's funeral pyre, that indicates that he was no power-hungry schemer. So both of them were sincere, godly people, but unfortunately they had their hearts and lives were bound together by fraternal affection, and yet these two were ripped apart by one misunderstanding, one hasty misjudgment. This is how relationships can be ripped apart. When Vali judged Sugriva without understanding, that judging without understanding became the recipe for ruining their relationships. We can also see in our lives that we often our relationships with others get strained, and sometimes they get ruptured also. And we, by the attribution error, often tend to apportion more blame to others for that relationship problem than to ourselves. But we can ourselves see also that if we can honestly introspect and also humbly inquire from others whether we committed the error of judging without understanding. So it's actually the story of Vali and Sugriva's unhappy story. But then the unhappiness was substantially reduced by the intervention, both martial and verbal, of Lord Ram, who brought about a pre-mortem just before death, a pre-mortem reconciliation, which brought the relationship to a peaceful end. So similarly, we can also try to evaluate whether we might be wrong, and we can try to bring about a reconciliation. Firstly, we can try to avoid judging without understanding, and if at all we become guilty of hasty judgments, then we can adopt the 3-point formula for rectification that we can see was adopted, that can be inferred from Vali's actions. So that 3-point formula is acknowledge, apologize, and amend. Acknowledge means when someone tells us our fault, we just become into a defensive denial mode. So we don't accept. But when Ram spoke Vali's list of misdeeds, Vali accepted that. That is, he acknowledged his fault, and then he apologized. Just as words of accusation can hurt and can break hearts, similarly words of apology can heal hearts. And Vali did not stop with just apologizing with words, he amended through actions. Just as he gave his necklace to Sugriva, similarly we can also through actions decide. We can, as appropriate, through our actions we can try to make amends for the for any error in judgment that we have done. And for Vali, it took death to seek amends, to make up in his relationship. Hopefully, if we meditate on his story and learn from it, then we can make amends without having to go through such a jolting experience in our life. Thank you. Hare Krishna.